Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mack, and oh my God, Cavs fans, the moment most people have been waiting for has finally arrived. JB Bickerstaff is out as head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, in 5 seasons at the helm, John Blair Bickerstaff managed to go 170 and 159 over the course of the regular season and 6-11 over the course of the playoffs. He initially took over the job after another John was let go. That would be none other than John Beeline, who would resign after a now infamous film session in which he was quoted as telling his team that they were no longer playing like a bunch of thugs. Look, man, I had to jump from a work meeting to get this because I saw the news come across my screen, and I'm like, oh man, the Cavs were playing this out for so long. There were so many different rumors that were coming out, and people are just wondering what is going on here. What direction is this team going? Why is it taking so long for a decision to be made? And to be honest, it was quite understandable, right? JB is coming off of back-to-back playoff appearances. One of them, the Cavs were completely trounced. The latter, the Cavaliers faced a ton of injury adversity, but nevertheless, it seemed clear that the Cavaliers needed to move in the next direction. Y'all know me. I've been a pretty staunch defender of JB at times, but here's the thing. Like, you could clearly tell that the writing was on the wall, that the Cavaliers had probably reached their apex as far as it was concerned in regards to him. He took them as far as he possibly could, in my opinion. Now, here's the thing. I would have been okay if they rolled into next season with JB, if they hired a really, really good offensive assistant. It became clear that that was not going to happen. So the next best option, and honestly, probably the best option overall, was to go this route. Go out there and acquire a new coach that emphasizes offense over everything. Now, just wanted to take a bit of time to run through the history of JB Bickerstaff real quick, since I am reacting to this right now. Bickerstaff, honestly, when he took over the job, he kind of gave the Cavs a little bit of hope for the future as he led the team to a 5-6 record down the stretch, as the NBA would halt activities due to the COVID pandemic back in the first season on the job. That seems like a lifetime ago, honestly. It really does. The COVID pandemic, all that, everything that happened with that just seems like 10 plus years ago. He would then go on to coach the Cavaliers to a 22-50 record in a condensed 72-game schedule, failing to reach the postseason, but improving upon the team's record the previous season by 3 games, despite a season full of injuries to numerous rotation players. And a lot of people don't seem to actually remember how much injury adversity that team faced. They just seems to escape a lot of people's minds. And although that injury adversity seemed to carry over right into the following season, something really special would happen as the Cavaliers made it a priority to surround their young talent with complementary pieces. They shipped out Larry Nance Jr. and brought in Lauri Markkanen, who would start at its 3 beside Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. They sent Taurean Prince packing for the veteran presence of Ricky Rubio. That surrounding talent then helped elevate the Cavs to a new height. They would endure a season-ending injury to Colin Sexton and then the aforementioned Rubio as well. But in their wake, players like Darius Garland and Jarrett Allen would take their game to the next level, making the All-Star game in the process, which was held in Cleveland, by the way. And I can go on and on about what happened during that awesome 2021-22 campaign. But at the end of the day, it all resulted in Cleveland doubling their win total from the prior season, going from 22 wins to 44 wins and a spot in the play-in tournament. And sure, it would end in disappointing fashion, but the Cavs were moving in the right direction, right? We're moving in the right direction. And then the blockbuster trade of the summer happened when the Cavs traded for Donovan Mitchell, immediately changing the timeline in the process and putting a giant spotlight and real expectations on the current core for the first time. The Cavs would turn in another great regular season performance, winning 51 games en route to making their first playoffs without LeBron on the roster since the 97-98 season, in which they would flame out in incredible fashion in 5 games against the New York Knicks. And that brings us to the 2023-24 year. Right, a year that was fun at times and brutally painful to watch at others. I know I cannot be alone in that line of thought. This season had some fun times, but this shit was damn frustrating at times. Injuries were a constant theme throughout as they took their toll. Donovan Mitchell missed 27 games. Darius Garland missed 25 games. Evan Mobley missed 32 games. Isaac Okoro missed 13 games. Max Strus missed 12. Karis LeVert missed 14. Dean Wade missed 28. Double T was suspended for 25 games for taking steroids. He was all roided out. It was an extensive list, guys. All of that, and JB still managed to get this Cavs team to 47 wins. The Cavs made a business decision, got the third seed, and then proceeded to go to war with the Orlando Magic, where they would win their first playoff series without Bron since, I believe, the 92-93 season. We are talking about the Brad Daugherty, Mark Price, Larry Nance, Eric Cavaliers, just to kind of give you an idea of how long it had been since they had won a playoff series without LeBron on the roster. They lost Jarrett Allen during that series for good, which left him in an automatic disadvantage, considering they were still down Dean Wade in the front court at that point. The Cavs then proceeded to give the Boston Celtics all they could muster in a 5-game series that isn't all that indicative of just how competitive it actually was. They lost Donovan Mitchell throughout. They were without Karis LeVert in the closeout game. It just felt like the odds were insurmountable. But with that being said, losses ultimately end up failing on the man in charge in this case, and that's JB Bickerstaff, right? It all circles back around to JB. He got the bulk of the blame, and as a result, the Cavs have let him go. They let him go. Being a head coach in the NBA or really at any level is often a thankless job, right? It's a thankless job. You get little of the credit for a team's success most of the time, and sometimes the bulk of the blame when things go wrong. It's the nature of the job, and JB, at least in my opinion, kind of personifies this idea. When you hear someone talk about the Cavs, you rarely hear them talk about JB, right? You rarely hear them talk about JB, and rightfully so. It's Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, and company that has absolutely carried this defense to the level that it got to. JB definitely played a role in that regard, but you can't talk about how the Cavaliers defense has become a top 3 or a top 10 defense over the past 3 seasons without thinking about the acquisition of these players. Started off by acquiring Jarrett Allen. He changed things, being able to switch going out and play play the perimeter just as well as he could play in an interior presence at the rim. It started with Jarrett Allen. Then the drafting of Evan Mobley just completely changed things from a defensive standpoint. They were able to cover up a lot of the shortcomings in the backcourt, right? The smallish backcourt of Darius Garland and Colin Sexton at one point, and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, right? And so that, to me, JB definitely is a defensive-minded coach, but I think a lot of the defense had a lot more to do with the roster construction in regards to some of the defenders that you have on the roster. You have an excellent perimeter defender in Isaac Okoro. You have 2 beasts in the front court on the defensive end. And then JB, right? JB definitely got these guys to buy in, so I give him credit for that. And I think that he will land on his feet at somewhere else, somewhere on somebody's coaching staff. But I don't know if he will get another opportunity anytime soon in regards to actually being able to be a head coach of a team. And so that's the point that we are. That's the point that we are at right now. But defense, honestly, was not necessarily JB's problem. We all know that. Most of the issues that fans have with him come from the other end, and they're pretty well known and have been for a while. He struggles with situational awareness. For instance, when to call a timeout or to hold a run or when to challenge a call. He is as inconsistent as hell with his ATOs. And perhaps the biggest issue that fans had with him during his entire tenure was the rotations that he deploys, right? It's refusing to play Sam Merrill at times, one of the NBA's better shooters. It's continuing to play George Niang over Marcus Morris when he is clearly struggling. It's going away from a lineup that got you back into a game or a lineup that is working at the time that it's out there. It's just a culmination of these things that has led to fans questioning whether or not JB could be the man to lead them to a championship and ultimately wanting to move on. And that's exactly what has happened. And when you question that as an organization, it's probably best to move on. And that's what the Cavaliers did today, right? That is the question that I think that was on Cavaliers fans' mind for the longest time. Now the question has shifted from is it time to let JB go to who is the best man for the job? That is what people that is the question now. Who is the best man for the job? And when you look at all the available candidates, because this is the thing, we heard time and time again that multiple head coaching candidates were just waiting this situation out, waiting to see what was going to happen, who was going to end up taking over. And I got my, I got my phone right in front of me, and I'm trying to look here for updates and see what's going on, or who could be the next man in charge. And I've already got my list of guys who I feel would be, appropriate for this position. There are definitely some interesting candidates out there. Let's start with one of the more favorable names out there, and that is Dave Adelman, the Denver Nuggets assistant coach, right? Dave Adelman, the son of Rick Adelman, who currently serves as the Denver Nuggets top assistant, is getting a lot of love, and rightfully so. He has helped lead the Nuggets to a top 5 offense over the last couple of seasons. And if you ask around, he's a very, very light guy. Adelman is highly regarded. Nikola Jokic, the MVP caliber player that he is quoting as saying, I really think he's the guy who's going to be the next head coach because he has that head for a head coach. That's a crazy quote. He is thinking in front, he knows answers, and he reads and reacts. Jamal Murray actually had very complimentary sentiments as well. As he said, he puts everybody in the right spots. When it's time to lock in, he can lock you in. He'll get on you, and I respect that. And I respect that a lot, just because we're all in it together. I go to him for a lot of offensive stuff. He's always given me great input on what we can run, and sometimes we have the same ideas. It's nice to see what I am feeling in the game. He is also seeing from afar. He definitely should be getting more coaching offers, and I believe he is. Right? We see rumors and reports that the Lakers are looking at him. There's a lot of people that are definitely looking at Dave Adelman as a potential head coach, and rightfully so. He is highly regarded for his offensive acumen. He won a championship with the Nuggets already. The only real knock on him is just the lack of head coaching experience, which can be overcome. And that's not as big as it's really not as big as people would seem to indicate a lot of the time in regards to not having that coaching experience. We have seen rookie head coaches come in and excel right away, right? You think about Steve Kerr, you think about you think about a number of guys out there, but there are definitely reasons why Dave Adelman makes sense for this position. The next guy that kind of comes to mind for me is um, is I'm sorry, I'm spacing out here a little bit. I had it. Mike Nori, who is the Minnesota Timberwolves assistant head coach. He is their top assistant over there. He has been with Minnesota since 2021 and has had coaching experience at the assistant level dating back to 2009. And he has taken on a much larger role since Chris Finch's injury and has helped many reach the Western Conference Finals for the first time since the 2003-04 season. I will be very interested to see him come to Cleveland. I think that is a name that makes a lot of sense for the Cavaliers. I think that Nori is also getting a lot of hype. He's getting a lot of questions. He's getting a lot of much due praise and recognition about what he is what he has been able to do for Minnesota over there. And I know I've kind of been neglecting the chat over here because I just kind of wanted to get everything off of my chest. I've been waiting for this decision to come out, but I'll go to you guys real quick. We have people in here suggesting Sam Cassell. He's definitely on he's definitely a name that's out there. We have people saying they don't want Sam Cassell. Spin Reek down here. Rumple Foreskin says, I think Vogel is available. Fixie says, doesn't Donovan want someone? I think it all just depends it just depends upon what Donovan's decision is going to be. I don't think he wants to be tied to this decision too much. They're going to ask his input. They'll get his opinion on it, but I don't think he wants to necessarily be tied to this decision. I don't think players really actually like that all that much, to be honest, because I don't think they want to be associated with like the hiring and firing of head coaches, right? It's something that probably weighs heavily on their minds from just a human standpoint. And that makes sense, right? But I do believe that you absolutely have to ask his opinion. I think that is very, very important moving forward. I think that I think that if you do and planned on sending him or extending him rather, you do have to get his input because he's going to be here for the long term if that's the thing. And one of the names that really I love that's out there right now that's also getting a lot of attention by the Lakers at that as well is Chris Quinn, right? The Miami Heat assistant who he's on the radar. He has been an assistant under Eric Spoelstra since 2014, if I'm not mistaken, after a 7-year NBA career and an international career playing for the Heat, right? The Nets, the Spurs, and also guess who? The Cleveland Cavaliers. He has ties to Cleveland in that regard. And so I think that he would be an excellent addition at the helm. But again, these are all guys who don't necessarily have a bulk of NBA head coaching experience, really none at all. Between Chris Quinn, Mike Nori, Dave Adam, and none of these guys really have top level experience in that regard. Another name that's out there, if I'm not mistaken, is James Borrego, the Pelicans assistant coach, who deserves mention because he helped New Orleans jump from 20th. That's pretty far jump, 20th to 11th in offensive efficiency this season after overseeing 10 win improvements in each of his final 3 seasons with the Charlotte Hornets from 2020 to 2022. And so I think that is another name that's out there that people would like to see get another opportunity at the helm, whether it's with the Cavaliers or somebody else. But you can't discount the production that he has gone and helped New Orleans go through, going from 20th to 11th in offensive efficiency. So that's definitely another name that's out there. Again, some of the other names you see: Sam Cassell, Kenny Atkinson is definitely somebody who continues to be floated out there. And again, here's the thing: the Cavaliers are not hiring anyone without presumably a Donovan Mitchell approval, or at least his opinion, and maybe even a commitment from Donovan himself. It's part of the reason why this process took much longer than fans were comfortable with. After all, Darvin Ham got fired at the drop of a hat, and rightfully so, right? Ditto for Frank Vogel. The Lakers are still searching for their coach, if I'm not mistaken, but Phoenix swept in and got Mike Budenholzer. And so I say all this to say that Cleveland, they took a while, right? They took a while to make this decision. And I get why they did. You have JB, who has been at the helm for basically 5 seasons, not a full 5, but at least 4. And while he did bring this team to the playoffs in back-to-back seasons, he kind of showed I want to say his ceiling, right? He did get a raw deal at times. I cannot discount that. I'm not going to sit up here and shit on JB this entire pod. I just can't do it because there were some good things that JB did, especially on the defensive end, but the production on the offensive end was lacking, right? The inability to get this team to score at a high level, that was huge, right? He had a ton of errors on the offensive side of the ball. It was failing to crack 100 points in numerous games throughout his time here in Cleveland in the playoffs. It was incredibly frustrating to watch him struggle with from an offensive inconsistency standpoint. It was incredibly frustrating to see him sit here and see him struggle with rotations at times and not knowing who the hot hand is or what's actually working for him or what types of players to utilize. It was just incredibly frustrating on a lot of fronts. And I will forever be grateful for him, on kind of propelling us forward and getting us back into that playoff territory. But I mean, you also have to credit that and attribute that to the addition of the players as well, right? The arrival of Donovan Mitchell, the arrival of Evan Mobley, the arrival of Jarrett Allen. And this is definitely a players' league. You need talent to be able to win. But I think that when you look at this, a lot of people are thinking to themselves that had you had a head coach that actually knew how to run a consistent offense, a guy who actually prioritized offense a lot of the time, that probably could have gotten more out of this group, because this is a very talented group of players. They are flawed, right? They do have their deficiencies, especially in the size area. They don't have a true to size wing out there that is that can space the floor and can defend at a high level and can stay healthy for that matter. They have a short backcourt in Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell as of right now, assuming that nobody's actually moved. But again, there are just so many dominoes that could potentially fall, and this was the first one, right? You had JB. The decision on JB was definitely something that people were waiting to happen for the longest time, because a lot of people thought that as soon as the offseason began, that JB would be let go, and that just wasn't the case. They took their time with this decision, and honestly, I understand it, right? You see the fact that all these other teams who were in a similar position just decided to let their coaches go and then start their coaching search early. And then a lot of them have actually found their guy, right? I already mentioned Phoenix went out there and got Mike Budenholzer. That is definitely a big pickup for them. They snatched him up on a 5-year deal. And Cleveland, they have a ton of guys here that they're looking at, and hopefully they bring somebody in soon. But I couldn't be more excited about this decision. I'm a fan. I remain a fan of JB. I hope that he lands on his feet. But I think just from a fan perspective, there's a certain level of excitement that goes on with like the newness of something. There's a certain level of excitement that pertains to a head coaching search, because you're like, hey, maybe this guy would fit best here. Maybe this guy could get the best out of this group. Maybe this guy could do more from an offensive standpoint. And you're looking at guys like Dave Adelman, who has coached a Denver Nuggets team to a really highly regarded offense. And obviously Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. and company, countless names on that roster, KCP included, have a lot to do with that. Again, because this is a players' league, you need players to succeed and to run that offense, but coaching does absolutely matter. And so you see what David has been able to do over there, and you think to himself, why not Cleveland? Because the Cavaliers do have a dearth of talent here. They do have big men who can facilitate in the likes of Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen is actually a much better facilitator than given credit for. You look at what Mike Nori has been able to do in Minnesota and really getting a spotlight shown upon him since what happened to Chris Finch, and you just see what they're able to do, man. Getting Minnesota to the Western Conference playoffs for the first time in basically 20 seasons. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. And again, a lot of that has to do with the roster makeup they have over there. Jaden McDaniels, who was absolutely amazing last night. Yeah, it was a sight to see them. And although Anthony Edwards and company ended up losing that game to the Dallas Mavericks, you just got to chalk it up, man. Dallas is a great team, but still, that was a great game. That was playoff basketball. You just love to see it. So I think Micah would be a very, very interesting option. I don't know, man. Again, I want to hop into this chat over here. People are going crazy in the chat. You got YT Gvel says, now trade Garland for Michael Bridges. Um, Honestly, on the Garland front, I think that I need to know what is going to happen with Donovan Mitchell, right? I think that it would be foolish for the Cavs to go out and trade Darius Garland without a definitive conclusion to the Donovan Mitchell saga, right? And when I say a conclusion, I don't mean, oh man, let's just figure this out. Let's ship him out of town. Let's just conclude the Donovan Mitchell era by getting him out of here. I don't mean that. What I mean is we need to know if you're staying, if you're going. I need to know if you are here for the long haul before I consider moving Darius Garland, because Darius Garland is still a very good basketball player. A lot of people just soured on this dude because he had an off year. Shit happens. Guys come back from worse. There is a lot of there is a lot of untapped potential in Darius, in my opinion. He's still very young. People do not understand that he's only slightly older than Craig Porter Jr. It's insane. So I think that you need a solid commitment, or you need at least a firm handshake or something in place for Donovan to extend in Cleveland before you consider moving Darius Garland. That's where I'm at in regards to that. I'm not out on DG. If DG, there has definitely been rumors out there that indicate that DG is going to seek a trade if Donovan Mitchell extends. And I understand why, from a pure basketball perspective. Maybe he feels like DG is not necessarily going to be able to further develop in without being the lead guy in charge. But you know what? What's interesting about that to me is I feel that a head coach could get the best out of these two collectively. If you don't have role shifting all the time, maybe you can get DG to play a more solidified role, because it often seemed at points during these last 2 years where Donovan would have his games where he would go off and DG would take a back seat, and DG would have likewise games where he would look like he is more on and maybe Donovan is not. It happened for the last 2 seasons. And it's not uncommon to see a star backcourt duo go through these types of things. But I often felt like they were not being utilized to the best of their capabilities from an offensive standpoint. I did feel like JB got both of these guys to buy in on the defensive side. They're not noted defenders at all, but I do feel like he got the most out of them from the defensive standpoint. That said, I think that you need to be able to get a commitment from Donovan before you even consider moving Darius. It frankly would be malpractice to move DG without knowing what's going on with Donovan, because you could end up losing both of them. Back in the chat here, Tom K says DG for BI. Pop in San Antonio likes DG, and you can imagine Lobster to Wendy. Lobs to Wimby. Yeah, I got you. I got you. But it's an interesting thought, right? It's an interesting thought, but I'm not a huge fan of Brandon Ingram. I do not feel I get it. I get it from like a size standpoint. He definitely would balance out the lineup a little bit better if you're moving Donovan Mitchell over to the point guard full time. You have Max Strus at the 2, you play BI at the 3. Evan and you got Evan and Jarrett still at the 4 and 5, depending upon what happens with Jarrett Allen. But I understand it. I don't think I would make that trade. But I wouldn't be pissed about it. But it's not necessarily a move that I would make. So I definitely understand it. YT Gavel also says, honestly, this comes down to what Mitchell wants. Yeah, I think it does. Mitchell has that kind of power, has that kind of sway. And when you make a trade for a top 20, top 15 player in Donovan Mitchell, that's what happens, right? You give them an opinion, and their opinion is going to be very, very highly regarded. It's going to be held in high regard for the foreseeable future until they're not here anymore. It's just what tends to happen in situations like this. You want his input. His input is definitely going to matter. I don't know if it's going to be like the biggest opinion, but it is definitely something that the Cavs will definitely factor in, especially if he signs on the dotted line. And I am so ready to see what ends up happening. Shams Charania is reporting that Kenny Atkinson and James Borrego are among the initial targets to replace JB as head coach. Like I said, I talked about James already. He got the Pelicans offense from 20th to 11th in terms of offensive efficiency this season. I think that's a great. I think that was a great thing for him to be able to go there and showcase his talents. And I think that it could end up resulting in him getting another swing at a head coaching position. And could that be in Cleveland? Who knows? Kenny Atkinson, head coach of the Brooklyn Nets at one point, he did get a lot out of them, honestly. A very inexperienced group. I believe Jarrett Allen was there. I think D'Angelo Russell was still there on that squad. There were definitely a lot of things to like about Kenny Atkinson's campaign with Brooklyn, and I think that is a name that definitely makes sense. I think that he would command accountability. I think that he would command respect from this group, and I think that Donovan Mitchell would probably be on board with that type of hiring. And so either of those guys I would feel comfortable with. I don't know if Karis LeVert was their leading playoff scorer, if I'm not mistaken, in that playoff series that they had there. Inefficient, but he was still their best option at points during during that point in time. But I don't think that they're going to end up with Chris Quinn. I think he's an option, but I think it's all going to depend upon what happens with the Lakers head coaching search, because we hear that we hear that JJ Redick and Chris Quinn are getting a lot of love in regards to the Lakers head coaching position. So I think that if they decide they don't want that, and who knows what's going on about that over there, with LeBron and company, maybe they turn their attention to Cleveland. But I think the job is probably going to end up going to one of those guys. Mike Inori is definitely up there for me. Like I said, Dave Adelman definitely makes a lot of sense here. But Shams is reporting that Kenny Atkinson and James Borrego are the initial guys here. JJ Menthol says, what about JJ? If you're going to take a swing on guys, preferably, I think JJ makes sense for LA because of the established connection between LeBron and himself, right? With their podcast and some of the other business ventures out there. But personally speaking, I want somebody who has some experience. Everybody that we've talked about, whether it be Kenny Atkinson, whether it be Dave Adelman, whether it be Mike Inori, Sam Cassell, James Borrego, all these names that I have listed off, Chris Quinn, everybody to a certain degree has some experience. Everybody has some experience. I don't want somebody who has no coaching experience. And clearly JJ is a basketball mind. You watch him or you listen to him talk basketball on Mind the Game. You see him draw up plays and explain simple basketball concepts to the casual viewer. I think that he could definitely excel in the coaching ranks. I'm just not certain I want to take the chance on in a pivotal offseason. I don't know if I want to take the chance on JJ with no coaching experience whatsoever at the NBA level. I don't want to do that. I do see that people do see people in the chat that would. Hannah says JJ would be ideal. Just don't see it happening. To each of their own. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be pissed if they hired JJ or if JJ ended up as head coach of the Cavaliers, but I do think that that he's probably going to end up in LA if he ends up anywhere. If he gets hired anywhere, it's going to be to coach LeBron. And that's where I'm at with that. But man, this was the first big domino to fall. Now you get to see what else happens. There's the decisions on there's the decision on Donovan Mitchell. There's going to have fallout in regards to that, in regards to Darius Garland and whether or not he's going to remain with the Cavaliers. There's still a lot up in the air about Jarrett Allen and whether or not he's going to be moved, because there's a lot of interest out there apparently for him, and there has been for some time. There's the Isaac Okoro restricted free agency. That is something that not many people are talking about, but is still something that is on the docket for this offseason, making a decision on him moving forward. And he cost himself a lot of money this playoffs. And y'all know I've been a big fan of Isaac Okoro since he arrived in Cleveland, but suffice it to say, he didn't show up in back-to-back postseasons now, right? He was given so much time to get to this point. The Cavs took their time moving him along and making sure that he was constantly included in the rotation at points, and they gave him an opportunity yet again during this playoffs to prove that he could do it when the time came, right? Because he did go through the best three-point shooting season of his career. And honestly, this was probably the best season overall of his NBA career. But come the playoffs, he couldn't do it. The Orlando Magic and Boston Celtics gave him a ton of space to operate from beyond the three-point arc. Outside of just closing out on him or rotating whenever he got the ball out there, they left him open most of the time, and he never truly made them pay for that. And as a result, his minutes were significantly reduced, and his impact was dwindling outside of the defense that he brings to the table and maybe some transition plays out there in the fast break. But I also, part of that, to me, I often wonder, could a different head coach get more out of Okoro? That's an interesting thing to me. Like, if the Cavaliers do end up bringing Okoro back, can you get more out of him? And I think the biggest argument against that is, well, Mac, if they're going to play him and they're going to put him out there as a spot up shooter in the corners, he has to knock down the shots. No head coach is going to be able to help that. And I think that is an important point to make, an important distinction to make. But I also can't help but wonder, could a different head coach, maybe a better offensive mind, get more out of Okoro, whether that be in transition, where do they put the ball in his hands more, whether they ask him to be a facilitator, which you've actually seen him have in his game at certain points. But I say all that to say, it's an interesting thought, right? To wonder whether or not JB didn't, as Tom K says down here, JB never leveraged to develop Okoro's offense. Look at his athleticism, standing still in corner. And that's why I believe maybe a different head coach, maybe a faster pace offense, maybe a little bit more ball movement could help facilitate Okoro's growth. But at the same time, one of the things that I think a lot of people fail to really account for here, not you, Tom, but a lot of people, is the addition of Donovan Mitchell really expedited things here, right? From a developmental standpoint, they cut the opportunities for guys like Okoro, Evan Mobley, and some of the other folks on the roster. Darius Garland probably could be factored in here too. But the addition of Donovan Mitchell really kind of, it didn't stunt. I don't want to say it stunted the development, but I do think that it massively slowed it down because the opportunities were just not as flush. And I think that obviously you make that trade 10 times out of 10, 100 times out of 100. But I think that when you do something like that, when you have guys who are coming fresh off of a rebuild and you have role players like Okoro who need reps, I think that you think that definitely hurt his development. But in saying that, Isaac did get opportunities. John V says JB gave every man their opportunity to get their shit together and contribute. Unfortunately, that cost us. I think that is fair. I think that JB, when you're talking about that from particularly that standpoint, though, I don't think it's necessarily that the players the players couldn't necessarily get their shit together and contribute entirely. I think that is definitely true in some regards, but I do think JB failed in other regards to put them in the best possible positions. The inability to run a consistent offense, the inability to put guys out there at what they do best and utilize their skill sets. I think that is where JB failed at. The inability to put together cohesive lineups and rotations at times. I think that definitely plays a role. And I think that you can't discount injuries, because injuries definitely played their role here, and it sucked. But at the same time, we have seen other head coaches do more with less, if that makes sense. And so while guys did get opportunities, I do think that JB definitely had a big role in that. Tom K says Evan Mobley's offensive potential was not developed. Look how wet his three-point shot looks. I think some of that is on Evan. I think a large portion of that is the fact that JB doesn't run or didn't run a solidified offense from night to night. You just saw their bread and butter was obviously the pick and roll, but you didn't see enough ball movement at times. The pace was still towards the bottom of the league. It's just a lot to not like. The rotations were not necessarily favorable. They asked Evan Mobley to cover up for a lot from a defensive standpoint, but I don't know, man. I do not know. Hopefully, the Cavaliers sort this whole thing out with their core four because, truth be told, I don't necessarily want to see the Cavaliers break this core four up just yet. That's just how I feel. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. I know a lot of people feel like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, the small backcourt that they are, cannot work. And I understand that. But I also would like to see them give it one more run, one more year together to see if a new head coach can bring the best out of this group. Because with the CBA being what it is, with acquiring top level talent being more and more difficult, I think that you will want to see this group try and put one more year together. In regards to the front court, Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, I get the concerns there as well. Neither of those two are consistently able to space the floor. Jarrett Allen cannot space the floor at all outside of what we call vertical spacing, right? His ability to be a lob threat out there and run the floor. His ability to operate and be a huge factor on DHOs and facilitation from the elbows and things like that and out on the perimeter. But neither of those two can knock down the three-point shot with any level of consistency. We have seen stretches where Evan Mobley has looked confident enough to pull the trigger and he will make more often than not, but they don't space the floor enough to pull or grab the attention of the opposing defense. They don't have gravity. I say all that to say they do not have gravity. So I understand that. But I can't also, just like with the backcourt, I can't help but wonder if a different head coach, an offensive-minded head coach, could get more out of him. I can't help but wonder that. And I think it would be worth visiting. I do want to keep the core four together at least one more season, but I do also realize that may not happen. If the rumors are true, maybe we do see Darius Garland request a trade or push for a trade if Donovan Mitchell extends. I don't know. Maybe they're false. Maybe Darius, because Darius, to our knowledge, hasn't come right out and said it, right? It's been through Rich Paul or Clutch or Brian Windhorst. You never know what is true during the offseason, especially at this point. And so I think that Darius is definitely somebody that I could see being on the move. The other player is Jarrett Allen, right? If people have soured on Jarrett Allen nearly as much as they have with Darius Garland, it seems, especially on social media, you would think that Jarrett Allen would be the next person out the door because he has a lot of value. He's on a very, very good contract. He has interest apparently from around the league, and he is one of the players, one of the few players on the roster that could actually bring you back a solid enough return to actually give you a complementary piece that might fit better beside Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. We know that Donovan Mitchell, assuming that he signs on the dotted line, or at least, and it shows that he intends on doing so the following season. Because what also can't be discounted here is that his his player option is not actually until 2025-26. It is very, very possible that the Cavaliers and Donovan Mitchell could go into this upcoming 2024-25 season with Donovan Mitchell still not under a new contract. Very, very possible. Whether or not they take that chance, I don't know. You can make an argument that they don't or they shouldn't because he will lose trade value if they wait into the regular season where they would have to trade him mid-season. You could argue that you just ride it out and see if they actually decide to let Donovan Mitchell make his decision at the end of next offseason. You could trade him this offseason. I don't know. All options are on the table, but I have never felt like Don is the kind of guy that will force his way out. I feel like at the end of the day, he just wants to win. We can talk about location all we want. We can talk about the fact that he's from New York or, from that area and that he might want to play for the Knicks or maybe he might want to play for Miami or, maybe the Lakers have interest in him and different things of that nature. But at the end of the day, I've never gotten the feeling from him that he is the type of guy that will force his way out. He is the consummate professional. He's consummate pro. He has never really been the type to show his hand or make a move without getting the full the full layout of the land and what is going to occur. And so we'll see. We'll see what he ends up doing. As AP says down here, the Nets want him. That is also a destination that Cleveland might consider if they do end up having to move him. If you move him, maybe you look at getting a Michael Bridges and Cam Johnson. There's a couple of guys over there that I think that would entice Cleveland if he ended up having to move. John V, man, I appreciate that. $20 says, Mac, big thanks for everything, man. I definitely appreciate that. That's awesome. First person who's ever done that. That said, I think with Donovan, you just kind of have to let things fall how they will, right? I've not gotten the indication that he actually wants to move on from this team. And I hope that's the case. To me, he's a top 15 player. To others, he might be top 20, but he is an awesome talent. We saw him operate at his best at the point guard position. That's not something that I can discount, honestly. I think that is definitely within his bag to be the point guard of this team. And if you do that, then you have a ton of opportunity to build around him and Evan Mobley both, right? If you're going to play Donovan Mitchell at the point guard, if you end up moving Darius Garland, I think that there is a solid case to be made that you can build around those two and build a formidable contender, right? The Cavaliers have the 20th pick in the NBA draft. There's a ton of guys out there that I'm covering. And I've released draft content on already, and I'll continue to do so. But if you end up moving Donovan Mitchell, I think that maybe you end up considering drafting a taller guard. And I think one of the guys that the Cavaliers have been linked to right now has been Bub, and I think that would be a great addition. Talking about Carlton. But I think that there is definitely a lot of different directions that this team could head in. And I know I've kind of spiraled off from talking about JB, but that was just a real first domino to fall, right? Now the Cavaliers offseason can truly begin. Now the head coaching search can truly begin. Now we can figure out what's going on with Donovan Mitchell. Now we can figure out if Darius Garland and Jarrett Allen are going to stay. Now we can figure out if Isaac Okoro is going to be re-signed. Now we can figure out if the Cavaliers are going to keep that draft pick or package it in a trade. By the way, if I haven't made it abundantly clear, if I haven't already hinted at it enough, I don't want the Cavaliers to trade that pick. This is not a star-laden draft by any means, but it is a great draft for depth. I think that the Cavaliers can acquire a day one contributor in this upcoming draft, and I hope they keep that pick. I do not want to see it moved. But that's essentially where I'm at. This was the first step for this Cavaliers team. I think it was the right decision. I've maintained my stance on JB all season long. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I tried to give him every opportunity to prove people wrong, right? I wanted him to succeed. And I think that's natural, right? A lot of people soured on JB after last playoffs, and I understand that completely. I get it. The Cavaliers were absolutely trounced. They were stomped out, whatever adjective you want to throw it in there. They lost in pretty bad fashion. And I think JB failed to rally his guys. And obviously the players played a big role in that. Jarrett Allen the lights were brighter than expected, or the lights were too bright, whatever the quote was. But JB is at the helm, and as head coach, as I said before, it's a thankless job, right? If you experience success, rarely does the coach get the bulk of the compliments, and likewise, when you fail or when you lose, usually you will get the bulk of the blame. It's just the nature of the beast, and I completely understand the decision. Again, I believe it was the right step. I thank JB for his time out there coaching the Cavaliers, and hopefully he does land on his feet. I think that he got us to a certain point. I think that he was able to elevate this Cavs team from a defensive standpoint and get guys to buy in. And it is my hope that the Cavaliers finally can close the chapter on the JB Bickerstaff era and move forward into the future. And despite the Cavaliers losing in 5 games to the Boston Celtics, I got to say, I still consider this season a pretty damn good one from that standpoint. You won a playoff series. You experienced a ton of injuries, and you still fought your ass off against the best team, or the best team in the Eastern Conference that many people consider to be Boston. Right. That said, moving forward, who knows? Who knows what will end up happening? This should be a fun offseason, though. But before we head out of here, as I always tell you guys, if you'd like to support the channel in a small but helpful way, please do consider becoming a paid member on Patreon over there. The link should be in the description. If not, I'll put it in right after this goes live. Right after it airs, rather. That definitely helps. Again, I will continue to make this Cavaliers content for as long as I can. And I do it because I love the Cavs, not because I'm trying to earn something here, but definitely helps, right? It makes the time even more worth it. If you'd like to reach out to me, you know how you can. It's Cavalier_pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. If you want to be added to this Cavalier Discord chat, make sure to leave a rating, leave a review wherever you stream this podcast at, and send a screenshot to iscavalier53@gmail.com, and I will send you an invite. That said, here's to hoping the Cavaliers make the right decision at the top, and go Cavs.